everyone, and welcome to another MEF Connect webinar. The title of today's discussion is Setting a Roadmap for Value-Added Services in the 2020s. My name is Tim Green. I'm the editor of Mobile Ecosystem Forum. And this session is a bit like going back to the future for us, because MEF was actually started to represent the value-added services community. 20 years ago when we launched, it was the mobile entertainment system, and we launched in response to the rise of value-added services like ringtones and wallpapers, which unleashed an exciting new market. Obviously, we've had a lot of changes since then. We've got 4G and video and smartphones and new business models and freemium and advertising and all sorts of things. But the fundamentals remain the same, which is that people still want to express themselves. They want to be entertained and informed on mobile. So what is happening in the world of value-added services and where is it headed? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by four experts who know a bit about this. They are Anzelle Robertson, who is the head of business development at Sam Media. She's joining us from Amsterdam. Bola Afuye, she's the head of digital services at 9 Mobile, all the way from Nigeria. Christopher Henseler is the operations director for Central Europe at Telecoming, based in Spain, but he's calling in from Germany. And Stuffman is the business development director of VAS Group in Nigeria. So a very global contingent. What could go wrong technically? I hope nothing. Before we start, just a quick reminder, some housekeeping issues. This session is going to last about 40 minutes. We're going to be recording it so that and publishing it on the site, so you can watch it again or share with any colleagues who might be interested. And if you want to ask a question at any time, please do. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and I'll be checking that throughout, and I'll make sure all your questions are addressed. So let's kick off. Let's start off with a definition. What is value-added services? How's it changed since 20 years ago? And we'll ask Tenny first, because she's got VAS in the name of her company, so she should be an expert. So Tenny, maybe you can tell us, how do you as a company define value-added services at present?
Thank you, Tim. Oh, wow, value-added service. It's adding value to services is like the extra factor that you bring into what you do. I will relate it with several things. There's not just mobile. You can add value to so many things in making sure your customer is satisfied, basically. So for me, other than the fact that value-added services added to VAS.net, value-added service really, it's just making sure your customer is satisfied, top-notch, making sure you provide what exactly it's a need to the customer, ensuring that the customer is not wasting, time or any other thing, or rather than just making sure that they are satisfied, so to say. Yeah, you caught me unaware.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously more than just entertainment products, isn't it? So I know that you do work in the health sector and things like that. So maybe you could tell me which sectors you are active in, whether it's health or payments and so on.
Well, so VAS.net is a trade partner. We are also wireless application service providers, and then we say we are VAS.net because we add value-added service to the networks. We cover majorly every area. We started from we mentioned ringback, coloring back tones, and all of that. That was the genesis of VAS.net, and then the demand and the evolving of new solutions, disruption, and all of that has widened the space of value-added service. So it's now in health, it's in finance, it's in agri. It's not just limited to entertainment and gossip as it used to be. It's now something that customers are willing to pay for if it's good enough for them. So really, we in VAS.net, for instance, we ensure that whatever it is we're providing as value-added service, it's not just something that is, it could be time framed, but it has to have impact, so to say. So it's cuts across all sectors. It's not limited to one sector. It's not You know, it used to be, oh, everybody say value-added services, oh, it's just centered around telecom services. But right now, value-added services are extended beyond telecom services, even to the financial sector. You know what we see in fintech today, if you ask me, is value-added service to what is happening in the banking sector, what we see in engineering and Internet of Things and all of that. They are adding value to what is existing. So basically, it's a major thing now, unlike what we used to have before.
If I may.
Yeah, I was going to come to you, Anzelle, actually, because obviously it's the European, maybe it's a different perspective from European. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
So firstly, I wanted to add what Teni was rightfully saying when she was defining, VAS as a value add. It's also about the perception of value to the end user. And in the multitude of markets that we're live in, of course, we see that differ from market to market. What's valuable to a user in a developed market is different to a user that may be in Tanzania or South Africa or the like. But at the same time, that core need remains, and the core needs, or one of three things actually, if you will, that I think led to the creation of VAS 20 years ago. I was not there at the time then, but I think is the need to fill time, like we've seen with our users in Kenya that spend a lot of time commuting and want to watch short snackable content videos on the bus while they do. The need to fulfill, so users need to self enhance, and that's when we get to stuff like M-learning, and the need to feed. So the need to feed back to a social community. So to post what it is that I've learned, to post this news that I've received, or whatever. And at the end of the day, I think those three things still remain at the core of VAS. So whether we're talking about the African market, and you've now posed me the question in terms of how that differs in Europe, I think how we deliver that value add differs from market to market, but the core need does not. What we've also seen is in the past, when we were talking about value added services, it was always ring fenced to digital content. Of course, in the earlier days, a ringtone or a wallpaper or whatever. But what we've increasingly been starting to do is adding tangible benefits to end users who use our services or who remain using our services after a period of time. Think about, for example, delivering little cardboard headsets by post for VR, AR and VR users in markets like Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Think about discounts at bookstores or on newspaper subscriptions for users who use our language learning tools in markets like Spain and South Africa. So we've seen a real uptake, and we've seen the popularity and the rise of combining tangible value, tangible benefit to the traditional value add that comes with digital content services.
So we're going to come back to some of those more future-gazing ideas later on. But Christopher, maybe I can come to you, because
yes.
To what extent is we've sort of touched on the traditional market for VAS, the industry, that the products that define the industry in the early days. Have Google and Facebook and Spotify and Netflix, have they sort of destroyed the market for those more traditional products, and you've had to go and look for it to create new products, or is there still a market for text alerts and the sort of things that people can go to Google for? Are there still a market for those sorts of things?
I mean, to tackle the first part of your question, have they destroyed the market? No. Maybe I would admit they made it more difficult, because creating value got more complicated for companies like us. Competing with a service like Spotify or Netflix is very difficult. They are globally public companies, and competing with those big players and creating real value became more difficult. This is true, but it's still possible, and the market is for sure not dead. And to answer the second part of your question, if it was if there's still a market for traditional products. And I believe you mean text alerts, ringback tones, wallpapers. I would say yes, but quite limited to certain countries. So for example, when I speak about the German market, I think ringback tones was a thing maybe 2005, and then disappeared quite quickly. And but I believe there might still be some Asian, some African markets with the low penetration of smartphones where this might still be a thing. But globally, I would say it's quite small. The market for those traditional services or products is quite small nowadays. So our job is to find the niches and the products to create real value in this environment of competing with those global OTTs like Spotify and Google and Netflix. Okay, well, I'm going to come back to you and ask you about some of that. But while we're on this topic of more traditional products, maybe we can come to Bola, because you are still selling some of these products.
Yeah, so I mean, I work with telco, an African telco, right? So I can probably give you a slightly different perspective on it. As a telco, firstly, I will answer your previous question and say, what is VAS, right? I think there is still a bit of room for some of the traditional services, primarily because of the context, right, and the user. And so what is happening, though, is rightfully a lot of the more traditional services are at end of life or just dying out. And so to give you a high-level view, if I look at my revenues last year and what proportion was coming from traditional VAS. When I say traditional VAS, I will sort of mean SMS, perhaps USSD and IVR, the sort of, services that we all knew or even RBT, where they would have accounted for about 90%, 95% 5 years ago. Last year, they probably accounted for 30% or less, right? So that gives you an idea of how big the shift has been. On the other side, though, you will still find that a lot of the issues in the African or the Nigerian context, say where OTT players struggle because billing is a major issue, right? And so you still rely very heavily on the telco as a partner to get reach and to be able to collect payment. So direct carrier billing, for example. And because of that, you still have quite a significant reliance. So I don't expect that the VAS will simply disappear, right? It will evolve, and there's certain things that have died out. So as categories like ringback tones are more or less at sort of end of life and sort of dying out quite gradually, and they expect to be completely dead in another year or two. But something like SMS, for example, right? While you're no longer seeing things like love alerts or news alerts, what has evolved is it's become a channel for very utility-based services, right? And so I'll give you simple examples. I want to check if my car papers are valid, or I want to check if, very simple utility-based services that are effective and work very simply via USSD or SMS, because connectivity is an issue, and not every, you still have only about just under 40% of people who have smartphones and are then connected actively to the internet, right? So those issues, connectivity and the reliance on airtime as a form of billing mean that unfortunately, VAS as we know it will still be around for a while.
So Tenny, is this the same story for you? Are you looking at sort of payment, being an intermediary in payments and so on as a way of building your business?
Yeah, so Bola is very correct. These are core services that used to make a lot of revenue in the VAS industry before now. But subsequent to the demand of the customer and the shifts in, disruption, we've seen that carrier billing changing and all of that is affecting the rates at which customers are demanding. Services are now being shifted towards sustainable services that are basically for, corporates, so to say. Apologies for the noise. Yeah, services are shifted to corporates, so to say. SMSs, USSDs are being used by organizations as against the value-added service that it used to be for. Also, we noticed that regulation has a lot of influence in the change that we've seen so far. The fact that a lot of things are shifting, operators are coming with their own rules, the regulators are also coming with theirs. It's making some form of, there is no stability as it used to be any longer. So it's the change is obvious, but we have issues with allowing disruption to take effect, because there are so many rules from both the regulations and regulators and the telcos.
Could you give me an example of when regulation has changed the way that you do business?
Yeah, so recently, for instance, so we work in Nigeria, Ghana, and Cameroon. I'll give you an example from Nigeria. Recently the regulator came up with bringing in an aggregator into the system. And the objective for bringing the aggregator is to allow the content providers to have a better chance of making substantial revenue from the service that they provide. But as it is, the discussion is still ongoing. We don't know if it's still going to, if the telcos will allow it, because subsequent to this time, telcos has a major chunk when it comes to revenue. Like Bola was saying the other time, the fact that the telcos calls the shots in our industry. They tell you, oh, this is how we want to play, and either you play it this way or you find another means. So the regulators are coming in now and saying, okay, bring in an aggregator to step into the ecosystem and allow the content provider to call the shot at this time. That seems to be some form of an interesting thing that may help VAS, but until it happens, we are where we are right now. It's still the telcos that calls the shots in our industry.
So can I just come in here? Tenny, can I just say something? Right? I think the output of all of this is a change in commercial model or approach, right? Where traditionally VAS has been B2C, what we have seen is the emergence of new types of commercial models that perhaps something like B2B2C, for example, right? And so that model that relies on airtime or direct carrier billing as a matter of payment is changing very rapidly. And so what you're finding are new models that are emerging where you are having brands or corporates, not necessarily in the form of advertising, pick up the tab so that customers or so that end users can enjoy services for free via this traditional channel.
Yeah, so you can imagine there's an ecosystem here, for instance, that works in the VAS sector as a group. We call ourselves wireless application service providers. Now you can imagine having some form of a subscription management platform that is built by the VAS providers. It would have, in a way, enabled easy form of billing, such that the monitoring of the platform and all of that will be managed by this group of people or the entity that calls itself the wireless application service provider, as against what we currently have with the telcos. The telcos are the one managing the subscription platform now. So you can imagine having a billing of, for the same content, you have a billing of, say, 50 cents on this telco platform, and then you have the same content going for 20 cents on another platform. So all of that are the challenges that we face ordinarily here, and then coming with the rules and the fact that procedures of getting your content on board on time takes a long time. All of that are the challenges that value-added service providers face. Yeah.
Tenny makes a good, Tenny makes a good point there, and she hits the nail on the head when she says that you have carriers and telcos making one set of rules, and as a content provider, we also understand and know perfectly where this comes from. And we've seen it indeed in Ghana with WASPAC there and with WASPA in South Africa and the carriers there, that if we rewind, right, to the VAS landscape 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a major rise in mobile advertising fraud. So all of a sudden we were seeing auto subscriptions, we were seeing malware in terms of in-app auto subscriptions, iframing and the like. Some regulatory bodies, certainly in the self-regulatory markets like South Africa and Ghana, took immediate action to address that. Others took a bit longer. In the markets where we couldn't find the correct or couldn't put the correct measures in place to deal with it fast enough, understandably, the telco said, well, we need to put measures in place. We need to have a 3-step verification process before a user can subscribe to a service. We want to do an OTP flow. We want users to be completing a reCAPTCHA and pointing out what is traffic lights in the blocks on the picture before they can see their love match this upcoming Valentine's Day. And whilst that was an understandable measure taken by carriers, again, this was 5 years ago. Now we need to look at how the industry and the ecosystem has evolved. We've seen the rise of cybersecurity service providers. So we've seen the rise of specialized solution providers who specialize in mobile advertising security. So on the one end, monitoring and seeing in terms of, or via a script that sits on the page, whether the click is an actual user or not. And these companies are very capable to secure the payment process without it having an adverse effect on the end user flow. And what we've seen now, so now rewind only another 1 year, so a little bit more recent, is what seems to be the best approach, or what seems to be a good formula, is when you bring all these players together. So when you take content providers, you combine them with reliable, if you want to call it anti-fraud partner or cybersecurity solution providers, and together we approach carriers or payment gateways and go, we can take this fuss out of your hands. We can alleviate that problem via, like Teni would know, a trusted payment gateway or some sort of master gateway setup. And at the end of the day, if you have a unified subscription flow or a unified one payment process via the market, firstly, it makes it less confusing to end users, and secondly, it addresses something that's just inherently wrong. Like on one carrier, the service cost $2, and on the other carrier it costs $1 simply because carrier A doesn't support billing this increment and carrier B does, or whatever.
Mm.
Mm.
Can I add something here as well?
Yeah, Christopher, please do.
I mean, Anzelle really tackled the main issue we're facing, like globally on carrier billing. It's a lack of regulation in many countries. And for example, we as Telecoming, we're not entering a lot of markets in the world because they are not regulated. If we would decide to enter it, we know we would compete with small local companies and players which take advantage of the lack of regulation, and it's in many markets it's a big issue that there is no master aggregator who's taking this very difficult job from the operators, because many operators, they don't have enough staff to do all this and be on top on the technology also. Like no one on operator side would know all the details. Anti-fraud companies which operate nowadays would know about the details of how does an in-app auto subscription work and how can I protect from this. And so there's a need for outsourcing of some of those jobs. Let's say it could be a master aggregator, or it could be involving an anti-fraud company which overviews the payment platform, and this is mandatory for most of the markets. Otherwise, it will maintain like it was in the past 5 years. It was a big up and down in many markets because, let's say, one guy is not playing by the rules. It affects everybody, and this is a big issue in the VAS market, that there's this little percentage of some players who not go by the rules, and which make it difficult for the big serious companies which are creating value for the customers and trying to sell their products. And yeah, this is a big issue. So regulation is a very important topic. I think for the next 2-3 years, there need to be big changes in a lot of markets. And by regulation, I do not mean 3, 4, 5-step PIN verification flows. The biggest advantage of DCB is a fast and easy payment, and this is mandatory and needs to stay. And we should create a common understanding that a combination of proper protection by experts and a customer-friendly payment flow is doable, you know, and that adding a PIN verification or 3, 4, 5 more steps does not deliver any further protection for consumer fraud.
I wish it was that simple, right? But of course, a lot of these issues have arisen from the VAS industry not taking the onus to self-regulate itself, right? And so what you now have is the other extreme, where there's a very strong pushback from the regulators, right? And so I think it's a tough one. It's not very, you know, it's not as easy. It's not as easy as that, because you have telcos, for example, who are suffering the backlash from their subscribers, right? Of these, you know, value-added services companies haven't, gone to the extreme. I think the outtake will be that the industry will shift, or the way the industry works will change quite dramatically. In Nigeria, I think that change has happened, and what you will see is that there's probably going to be quite a lot of consolidation in the industry, where some of the small players might disappear, right? Especially with the introduction of this new aggregator, there's 9 of them. So I guess it's not a single master aggregator, but there's this new entrant into the ecosystem. What is not clear though is what value that player is going to bring. It's going to bring to play. For one, you still need the telcos, and this is the key thing, especially in the African markets, where delivering services as an OTT player is not that viable, because if you look at Nigeria, for example, only 4% of people will make a payment with their cards, right? And so when you have payments, numbers or volume so low via payment gateways, you rely on airtime. You still need the telcos. And so the answer to me has to be partnership. You have to partner with the telcos. Otherwise, it's going to be a tough call. To scale will be difficult.
Okay.
I would like to add to that. Yes, I agree to the partnership. It's very, very essential, because of course the telco has the platform. However, it's also important to note that, telco's focus really is on their core services. What we bring is additional to the core services. It's value to the core services. It's disruption that can help it, both generate revenue and add value.
Sorry? I think you find that any telco that is still relying on voice and data revenues will probably be dead very soon, right? So
I agree with you. I'm only saying your core services has shifted, actually. It's no longer voice. Yeah, so your core services is shifting into a lot of things, payment and all of that as well. So I know. But nevertheless, the role that the VAS plays is the fact that regardless of whatever it is you're building as your core services, we still bring the value. We still bring the disruption, because you can't own it all. So it's very important for us to be able to agree on defining roles that each player will be, bringing on board. You mentioned the aggregators, for instance, in Nigeria, that their defined roles is not as clear as we want. That's where the regulators play. And sometimes I also wonder the fact that even the regulators do not know the dynamism of our industry, because it keeps growing every day. The customers demand it.
Define that.
Say that again?
Whose job is it to define those roles?
I think it's an ecosystem, so it should be the partnership of every stakeholder in the system. It shouldn't be just one, because like I said, the telcos own the platform. We bring the value. The regulators make us do better. They make sure that our licenses are used by enforcing their own rules, making sure the licenses are used as expected. You remember there was a time we had the DND issue, where and that's really affected the market. And I think it's also happened in Ghana, where customers are told, okay, so you can unsubscribe just by doing this and all of that. Even the customers that have good intention of subscribing to sustainable services that would have helped to make better things and better value to them had to unsubscribe because of the confusion that information was passing, that SMS is no longer in quotes as good as it used to be. It's now a way of taking your money and all of that. And that affected everybody, including the regulators as well. So it's high time we started looking at how we can make sure that whatever it is we're building is sustainable. It's not just limited to revenue. It's driven by value. Look at the digital space, for instance. The fact that customers are shifting from SMS, like you mentioned, SMS and USSD, and now shifting into the digital space of, you can get everything you want with, a lot of social media platforms, a lot of streaming platforms, Netflix and the big giants and all of them. And they are coming into this developing economies as well. So it's the demand that customers is playing that is causing the disruption that should help to make rules that will guide everybody to play fair.
Okay, let's move this conversation away from regulation because we could talk about this for hours. So, Christopher, I'm going to come back to you. Tenny's just kind of raised this topic of kind of what a role of an aggregator is now, given that there is so much content available to people. So, you talked earlier, Christopher, about some new services that you're developing. Maybe you could give us an insight into the kind of future direction that you're looking at.
Okay, as an aggregator, or you want to speak about the future products and services, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, as an aggregator, traditionally you would have been creating content. Maybe now you are still creating content, I don't know, but certainly you'd be looking at curation and payment services and so on.
Yeah, I mean, in general, we as Telecoming consider ourselves as a technology provider.
Yeah.
In advertising technology and payment technology. And on the content side, we are developing content, yes, and we are curating content. We have hundreds of licensing partners where we gather content to fit into many different portals in all kind of verticals, which could be gaming, which could be e-learning, which could be video streaming, and many different more. And to talk about some future services, we currently see huge trend in esports. Generally speaking, we see big potential in sports because this is not widely covered by big OTTs. So I don't see any global Netflix or Spotify for sports, So this is still a very interesting vertical in general, and esports is on the rise. You see platforms like Twitch growing worldwide, and if you look at countries like South Korea, where on TV there's more esports broadcast than regular TV broadcast, this will grow rapidly during the next years. So this is for sure one of those verticals we're working on. Also, we talked briefly about VR, and AR is very interesting as well. And on the VR side, we have developed 2 years ago already very nice services where we gather really nice games, which you play with a cardboard or any professional VR headset, and 360 videos, which can be viewed without a cardboard, with your phone, where you can watch like a nice movie or clips about nature on your phone, and see the 360-degree view, which is something still pretty new, and you don't find this for free also on the most common platforms. So there's still big added value, coming back to VAS in this type of services. So I would say those are two of the bigger topics, besides of big topic, I believe, in the next years, which will be cloud gaming, which is now with Google Stadia, and the rollout of 5G services during the next 5 years. This will be very big and change the gaming industry at all. Yeah.
And Anzelle, what about you? What sort of future trends are you anticipating? I think you're still on mute.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Christopher touched some of it, and there's some overlap there also in what we do in terms of AR, VR, and sports and so I won't go into that. But looking more on not the content itself that's being built, but how, and maybe it's something that we've not yet discussed, and that's mobile money. And that's something that we've spent the better part of the last 2-3 years really focusing on, and really seeing how media can provide much of the newest generation content that is more easy to monetize in the developing markets, how we can provide that to, in developed markets, how we can provide that to developing markets, bearing in mind, of course, that the cost of data and the accessibility to data is a problem. We've looked at solutions like partnering with suppliers who allow us to have the data sponsored, and allowing users to not pay for this by means of DCB, in that airtime might not be as easily accessible or available as mobile money is in markets like, of course, Kenya for some time already, but Ghana also gaining traction there, Tanzania for some time. I think what really opened the doors for that was late 2017, early 2018, when the iStore and Google Play started accepting M-Pesa as payment method for digital content. And what that meant is that millions of users who had already been using mobile money to transact for physical goods for the first time could also use that as a payment method for digital content, which they've been craving to get their hands on in any event, but were either unbanked or not having a credit card or whatever the case may be. So that's something that we think will really be worth watching in the year going forward.
And how would Sam Media, what part would you play in that process?
Sure. So we've already gained some experience initially well, let me take a step back. On the continent, we've been around since about 2010, providing first traditional value-added services, indeed ringtones, wallpapers, and the like. And we've grown into curating and also developing our own content with a much more localized flavor. So I'm South African, so starting there, also knowing the market a bit, we looked at what users really want and how that differs to what we've been selling in our home markets of Malaysia, the Netherlands, Western Europe, and so on. From there, we spent a lot of time in Nairobi, spent some time in Accra, and trying to understand the market, develop services that really speak to local markets. One example being a feedback that we got from some of our carrier partners in South Africa was that infrastructurally, education remains a problem. So people are able to go to school, but it remains a problem to add to the basic education that governments provides with some sort of additional tool or additional learning. Working with some universities in the Netherlands, we developed or were able to ultimately license a product that does exactly that. So it adds as an education boost, and it can be consumed by means of daily interactions where kids and students, and also the elderly that wish to better their IQ or better their social interaction and speaking skills, can track their progress and on actual tangible tests. It's fun, but it's not just a game. It's a serious actual medical product. Anyway, and working with 2 carriers in South Africa, we managed to start rolling that out, and the next stop is Kenya and Ghana. So I think that's where Media plays a role and continues to hope to play a role, is to bring the more localized content to the correct audiences via the correct payment partners, be that sort of master aggregator or a local carrier that is looking to add actual value with a good reputation to their end users.
And Tenny, Anzelle's just sort of touched on health, mobile health, and that kind of thing. I know that you work in that area as well. Maybe you could tell us about some of the services you're offering.
Oh yes, I was just going to also add to what Anzelle just said now regarding payment services being one of the key key areas in the future, even in the health space. So before now, it used to be, payments termination used to be via airtime and all of that. And then the telcos in this territory are also moving into, they have licenses to allow payments via, bank payments and all of that on their platform as well. So that is also enhancing the impact of payments for value-added services, including health services in Nigeria and in Ghana as well. So the fact that the telcos can now allow payment gateway to be integrated to their platform, that is also helping. For instance, we are building our payment gateways and integrating, leveraging on the existing connection that we have with the telcos, right, to allow these same value-added services, but much more as based on demand of the customers. In the health space, for instance, we have partners, including some of the telcos that has exclusive partnership with them to provide health services with ensuring that the doctors are paid instantly when they render such services, and then the payment is not via airtime, is not via bank transfers and all of that. So those are the value that the health sector is also bringing in the space. Also, I wanted to add to one of the trending things that we are seeing, and that is lottery. And here, for instance, lottery is like religion. So in every space, you see everybody, spending one or two amount of money in playing lottery. So that's another focus area, another trend that will help boost the VAS industry is lottery and games. Also, solutions like, sustainable solutions like agric, for instance, are also helping. The fact that the farmers can now get payment through the channels and, interoperability is easy in Nigeria, is allowing easy flow of services and also allowing customer satisfaction. So I give you an instance, a farmer, there's a value chain now that's, is evolving. It's not there yet, but it's evolving. The fact that the telcos allow payment makes it easy for these farmers to sell their goods using digital services and at the same time get their money. Everybody is happy. The same what we see in Kenya, it's transcending into other African countries, and it's just changing every time.
And Bola, what about you? What trends do you see dominating value-added services from an operator point of view?
Yeah, I think everyone has covered quite a lot of what I see happening. So the shift, for example, to mobile wallets instead of airtime as a means of payment, I think that's quite huge. And what that will do is that will shift the commercial models, quite considerably. But outside of everything else everyone has mentioned, the other areas I see as emerging, so there's a big push now for telcos starting to monetize the assets that they have, right? Moving away from what value-added services are. And so I think there's quite a big push into that space. So you see people monetizing APIs, for example. And so if you, for example, imagine trying to, in a market like Nigeria, or in a lot of the African markets where data is probably not readily accessible, right? And so you want to do things like credit score people, or, find out information like location and go confirm or verify addresses. What you're seeing is that the ecosystem is now, starting to support those kinds of things. And so that model of what I call monetizing of existing assets, primarily through things like APIs. There's also an emergence of reliance on data, and all that data that's being collected, sitting some sort of analytics on it to then deliver again APIs that add more value to the broader ecosystem and not just the end user. And so for me, that's a big, there's this big shift away from focus on the end user or the simple B2C models to more B2B models or B2B2C models where, where the telcos are interacting with developers directly or interacting with brands directly who have, who have interests in where they feel that the telcos can meet their needs. That's number one. Secondly, I think messaging is also quite a big part as well. So there's been quite a big evolution of messaging, for example. We've seen your arrival of WhatsApp for Business, for example, but then you've also got things like RCS, which are now taking off on the continent. The Nine Mobile, for example, went live with RCS a couple of months ago, right? And we expect two other operators to follow quite quickly. And so those kinds of trends in areas like messaging are also fast developing and sort of changing the story.
Christopher, if I could come back to you here. So Bola's just sort of talked about the evolution of aggregators towards providing perhaps B2B services rather than B2C services and data analytics and so on. Is that a migration that you've seen in your business?
Yes, for sure. So on the B2B side, we are also working closely with many operators worldwide, providing, for example, anti-fraud technology, providing a tool called Landing Manager, which is something which operators can use to manage all their sub-aggregators to have unified payment environment, let's say. And so we are pushing a lot also on the B2B side. And I think this will also become bigger during the next years. And we want to be on the forefront of this. And then also I think we didn't really tackle the PSD2 yet. So there are also a lot of new business models opening up there on the ticketing side for parking, for concerts, in so many new areas opening up for DCB payments.
And Anzelle, as we come towards the end of the webinar now, maybe we can go back to the beginning, and you were talking about some of the, almost merging with physical products and things like that. Maybe you could just update us on where you're at with those sorts of ideas.
Yeah, I think that ties into a bit into something that I was just thinking of mentioning as Christopher was speaking, is that we've now mentioned RCS, and I'm happy that nobody's mentioned blockchain, and at the risk of using another buzzword, but we also have to remember that 5G. And what's clear, and as I was preparing for this call, watching some interviews on also MEF and Telemedia Online, is there were no less than 3 instances where representatives of mobile carriers were quoted as saying that, well, 5G is coming, but we need something to show for our connection. We will have this high-speed internet, we will have no latency, we will have instant data transfer, but we'll need the content to show that off. And that's where things like AR gaming and VR streaming and so will become important. And that's where merchants like ourselves and Christopher and others who've evolved together with the industry and who continue to evolve and who have the resources and the ability to be at the forefront of what is trending and happening, can actually deliver the content that can do justice to the technology that we have and to the technology that carriers are sitting on. I think that ties to what I said in the start in terms of also then adding that tangible digital element to it in some markets where that's a nice value add. But I think the core is that combination of operators' technology combined with the meat that we can put on their bones.
Yeah.
At the lack of a better analogy.
I would like to add one little thing here. So I also believe that companies like ours or Media that we can really help operators to get a piece of the big cake from all the contents out there, which Apple and Google kind of took from them, with the rise of apps and the operators are basically mainly earning from selling data, and they are not earning money from selling apps and not earning money from selling games. So, and with the bigger aggregators like us, who have access to all kinds of contents, to big gaming studios, this is a nice way, and I think it. For operators also to increase their revenue from the part they missed during the rise of the apps since 2008, basically, when the iPhone was introduced.
Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of our allotted time. Obviously, we just touched on 5G. I mean, we could have a whole other discussion about the impact of some of these technologies, but what we do know is that technologies might change, but people don't. They still want to be entertained. They want to express themselves. And obviously, there's a mobile business here comprising operators and aggregators and so on that have been very, very successful this in the past, and will no doubt invent new products and services and do the same for the next 10 years. So with that, I'm going to thank Bola, Anzelle, Christopher and Tenny. Thanks for joining us. Look out for the article and the recording on the website. And until then, see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.